Because geofilters are usually conveying a message or naming a place, they tend to have some sort of text inside the geofilter. Because the message and the place are unique, you also want the text to be unique. And this is a perfect opportunity to use hand lettering to create unique text in your geofilters. Now I've practiced hand lettering for thousands of hours, and there's a lot that I could share here, but I'm going to keep it focused on just the basics. And if you want to learn more, you could go to dangonzalez.com/lettering. And if you sign up there, you will receive a free email course on hand lettering. Lettering concepts that you'll need to keep in mind throughout the lettering process. So first, we're going to cover some of the basic terminology and rules when it comes to lettering, and then we'll get into how to draw some of the basic lettering styles. When lettering any word, you're going to end up using these basic structures to base your lettering off of and then modify. So it's important to keep in mind the structure that your lettering falls in. When you write your words, they're generally going to be in this structure. This is the cap height, and this is the top edge of your letters. And then this is the X height, which is the mean line between the top and the bottom, and it's generally between 50 and 66% of the size between the baseline and the cap height. And then you have the baseline where most of the letters sit. And then you have the descender line, which is generally the same distance from the X height to the cap height, from the baseline to the descender line. So that distance and that distance are the same, usually just to make them feel a little bit more connected as far as a system of letters. And this is where the letters that drop below, like the letter Y, are going to hit the bottom of this line, and they're going to rest right there. Next is the concept of letter spacing, or kerning. And kerning is the space between two letters. And the space between two letters varies depending on which letters they are. I like to break these up into 3 different categories, and this is straight on straight, straight on curve, and curve on curve. And what this means is if both letters have a straight edge to it on the side, then it deserves a full space. If the letter has a straight on one letter and the other letter has a curve, then this is a 2/3 space. So whatever the size of your full space is, then this is 2/3 of that full space. And also for the curve on curve, this is for a letter that has a curve next to a letter that has a curve. And what this is, this deserves a 1/3 space, and that would be 1/3 of the space of your full space. And the reason for this is our eyes will perceive letters to be further apart if they are curved rather than if they're straight. For example, this A, because it's curved, it seems like the letter starts more over here. So we kind of had to move this letter over in order to adjust for that and make sure it looks good to our eye. Next is the idea of contrast. And contrast is the difference between the thick and the thin strokes on letters. And in this case, this would be considered a relatively high contrast letter because it has really thick strokes and then really thin strokes. However, in this case, this letter is very low in contrast because it's very even all the way around, and there's not really a difference between the thick and the thin strokes. However, all letters do have some sort of contrast. Most letters do have some sort of contrast, even if it's very slight. For example, in this H, you can see that this is a very low contrast H, but this horizontal line is slightly smaller than the vertical lines on this H. And there's a few rules to keep in mind when adding contrast to your letters, and they come from traditional calligraphy. So if I add some tracing paper on top of this and use my brush pen, you could get a better idea of why there's certain rules to adding contrast. So I'm going to add my tracing paper, and you could still see the letters through the paper, and you can see why when you push down on a downstroke, it's going to have more weight to it, and it's going to be a thicker stroke because you're adding more pressure. So that means on downstrokes, you're going to add more contrast to those. And on the upstrokes, there's generally less pressure on the pen, and these end up in thinner lines. So on upstrokes, they're going to be a little bit lighter or thinner strokes. And we could do that again and see that when you pull down, there's going to be less pressure or more pressure. And when you go up, there's going to be less pressure. The same thing with the A. When you go on the upstrokes, it's going to be thinner. Downstrokes are going to be thicker. And also, horizontal lines are going to be thinner than vertical lines. So that hopefully gives you a better idea of where to add contrast. To overshoot. And just like we did in kerning to adjust the letters to make it optically pleasing, overshooting does the same thing, but with the cap height and the baseline. Because curved and pointed letters look a bit further away from the baseline than normal letters, it is best to overshoot that baseline and overshoot the cap height in order to make it look like it's more aligned with the other letters. So now that you have a better idea of some of the basic lettering concepts as well as some of the rules that go along with them, in the next lesson we're going to learn how to draw some of the basic lettering styles.